When you transact Azure, Azure is billed through subscriptions and Azure plans. And, on the back end, there's some complications. But the reality is you're probably paying for Azure one of a couple different ways. You're paying through your current licensing provider, a CSP, like Sourcepass MCOE. We sell Azure to a lot of our customers, and it's just one of the subscriptions we manage and bill for them. You can also buy it direct from Microsoft, where you just go to the Azure website, you click set up a trial for me, put in a credit card number, and you go. And then the third variable that a lot of people end up buying Azure through is through their enterprise agreement. Larger companies enter into these agreements with Microsoft where they agree to a 3-year term, and Microsoft gives them certain discounts, assuming that they'll, as part of the agreement, that they'll pay for it for 3 years. And Azure actually becomes a key part of that, in that you often commit to multiple years of Azure costs. You kind of say, I don't think I'm going to spend less than 10 grand a month in Azure. And then you've committed to 36 grand worth of Azure spend as part of that EA agreement. So there's a lot of variables there. When you do have an Azure subscription, if you're buying it direct, you have access to pricing data. It'll show up in the Azure cost management section of the Azure portal. If you're buying it through a partner, sometimes those partners disable that functionality. That is an option as a partner that they have. Generally speaking, we don't disable that. We want you to see what you're billing, because we want you to see your costs and be able to manage that, because we understand what value that is there. We want to make sure that we're a valuable part of the chain, and we're not making it more difficult. So if you don't have Azure cost management in your Azure portal, it's likely that either your partner's not giving you access, or maybe your account doesn't have access to that data. It is a set of data that has the permissions around it in the role-based access. And so maybe you need to find out who's your account owner or your partner and have them make sure you can see that. That's a critical step in being able to understand what's going on with your Azure. It does produce some decent reporting and timelines, and so you can start to see what your costs are over time. And let me pull up some images of that. I don't have a tenant I can show you, but I will pull up an example from just a quick search here. So this is an example of what Azure Cost Management can look like. It has these nice graphs, and you can dig into those details to understand what is going on with your Azure subscription and see where the spend is going over time, and start to optimize it through some of that reporting. So I highly recommend checking that out. That's a great resource for you to review. There's also a section in there called Azure Advisor, which will give you some of the recommendations we're going to talk about today. There are some common ways to save money in Azure, and Microsoft will actually help you with some of those with their own heuristics, and will give you that information through the Azure Advisor page. The key with this section here with the cost management is to understand where the majority of the cost is. And that becomes probably the most important step. A lot of times people have multiple subscriptions, multiple resource groups, multiple Azure plans, and they just know that their Azure bill keeps growing and they don't understand why. Common reasons for bills growing is that not all resources in Azure are the same cost. There are some things that are much more expensive. And so if you leave them running, they will drive your bill up. And so, for example, I can store a terabyte of data in one of the low-cost storage methods in Azure for dollars a month indefinitely. And the price never changes. It's just a flat fee. Technically, Azure bills by the minute. I think we get billing reporting by the hour, but that has a set cost for that much data in a storage blob account, in archive storage per hour. And that's not going to change over time. You can store that data there, and it's a consistent cost. It will change based on the number of days in a month. So if you have it'll cost you less in February than it does in November, but it's a pretty static cost. Where costs can start to balloon on you is especially larger VMs. You want to build out a really big VM in Azure. Want to run it, 16 core, 120 gigs of RAM, virtual machine. Those costs can be large. We're talking, a couple dollars an hour, dozens of dollars an hour, depending on the size of it as a video card. And you can spend thousands of dollars a month on a VM. Well, if you spin up a couple of VMs and don't realize it, and the next month your bill was a couple grand higher, that's why some of those VMs are expensive. There are other things that often cause some Azure costs to grow on you. And a common one is you're running something that's collecting logs, something like Microsoft Sentinel. Microsoft Sentinel is Microsoft's security automation and SIM and SOC tool. Really powerful tool, does some great stuff. But one of the things you can do is you can wire in all these services to send it log data. And the more log data you give to Sentinel, the more cool things it can do. And it can look for patterns and threat actors and breaches and all these things that it can give your security team data on. But the default place it lands in is a log analytics workspace. And that is expensive storage in the Azure world. And so if you're just pumping in logs from every firewall and every endpoint and every server and every event log and all these things, and you're not doing any sort of filtering or cleanup or storing historical logs in a different solution or maybe tiering your storage, there's a number of ways we can address it. Azure Sentinel can quickly be something where you're paying $2,000 a month for it 1 month, and 6 months later it's $10,000 a month because you have all these logs you're storing, and those all bill. Every gigabyte of logs bills you by the hour for the storage of it. So it can get away from you, and so cost management, this cost management portal becomes a really key tool to go find out where your money's going and why, and even see some historical data about that.